Hello my loves, how are you all today? Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Silvina, and in today's video we're going to continue talking about 5 more people that I think that influenced the fashion industry and changed fashion forever. So we already did 5 a couple of weeks ago, and there are certainly more than 5, even more than 10. So if you want a part 3, let me know down in the comment section, and also let me know who do you think that should be on this list. So without any further ado, let's check out who are these 5 personalities. Okay, number 1 is Beau Brummel. So for those of you who don't know who Beau Brummel was, basically to define him in a very contemporary concept, he was like the top influencer and male fashion icon of the Regency era. But on a more serious note, he was a very important and prominent figure during this period, and he was also actually very friends with the Prince Regent and future King George IV, and for many years he was like the arbiter of British men's fashion. He was always very well dressed, stylish, well mannered, and very well put together. That's why nowadays when someone is very stylish and dandy, people call them Beau Brummel. And the interesting thing is that he wasn't really from a high class or aristocratic family to begin with. His family were originally from a middle class, but they were very adamant that he becomes a gentleman, and that's exactly what happened. So he ended up going to Eton College and Oxford University. There he started to show his interest in fashion, remodernizing the white stock or cravat that was like the mark of the Eton boy, and added a gold buckle to it. But by the time that he reached Oxford, he made cotton stockings and old cravats fall out of favor. Some people even quote him to be the creator of the modern suit, or at least he had like a big influence in its creation. And like we said, since he was a friend of the Prince of Wales, he had a very good reputation and influence in society, becoming a very noted figure in the fashion world. He took the habit of replacing very ornate and extravagant clothing and replaced it with more understated, clean, and perfectly tailored pieces. A signature style of his was a combination of a linen shirt with a very elaborately knotted cravat, and like every gentleman of his era, he ditched the outdated knee breeches and stockings for full-length pants. He spent a lot of money on clothes, more than the average man from his era, and since he was regarded the most stylish and best dressed man of his era, high class and aristocratic men usually came to him for advice. He actually unfortunately ended up dying broke due to gambling and with a very unkempt appearance, very contrary to how he lived his whole life. But I think that his influence still remains as a very important part of fashion history. Okay, number 2 is Madeleine Vionnet. So as we said in the previous video, the late 19th and early 20th century was like the golden period for Parisian fashion. There were so many great designers, and Madeleine Vionnet was one of them. She's called the Queen of Biascat and the architect among dressmakers, and this is because she's best known for her Grecian style dresses, for popularizing the Biascat, and she's credited for being the inspiration of many current designers like Galliano, Alaya, Issey Miyake, and so many others. Alongside other designers of the time, she sought for a departure from very formalized and stiff pieces to softer pieces that accentuated the woman's body. Her Biascat clothes dominated haute couture by the 1930s, setting trends with her sensual dresses that were loved by international actresses like Marlene Dietrich, Greta Garbo, Katharine Hepburn, and so many others. So the Biascat is a technique to cutting fabric, which basically cuts in a diagonal shape from the grain of the fabric in a 45-degree angle. This enabled the fabric to cling to the body and stretch it while moving with the body. And while she didn't actually invent the Biascat, she was the first one to utilize it in a full garment. Prior to this, it was only used for specific details. Outside of the designing process itself, she also fought for copyright laws in fashion and for promoting favorable work conditions like paid holidays and maternity leave, daycare, a dining hall, and a resident doctor and dentist for her workers. So she was definitely a woman ahead of her time, and her influence still carries up until today. Okay, number 3 is Aristide Boucicaut. So I know that in this video and the previous one we talked about so many designers, but actually Aristide Boucicaut was not a designer. He was in fact a French entrepreneur who created Le Bon Marché in 1852, which was the first modern department store. He was a marketing genius, and he introduced so many different ways to sell fashion products, especially targeted for women, recognizing the untapped potential of the female consumer market, which at that point it didn't happen. Like everything was targeted either to men or the household itself. Some of his new tactics were buying in bulk and selling with a very low profit margin. He also established fixed prices with associated discounts on sales, which up until that point it didn't really happen for clothes and similar products because people used to haggle for prices back then. He also created a waiting room for husbands to read and spend time while their wives shop. He created the first mail catalog sent to customers from which people could order. He let people browse, touch, experience, and try the clothing. And he invested extensively in newspaper advertising. So Le Bon Marché was not, the typical department store where you go and shop and that's it, you go home. It was a place where people could socialize and spend time, generating for the first time a whole experience around the shopping process. It was a place where women could escape from the monotony of their daily lives and do something different and immerse themselves in a world of luxury and beauty. He ensured that the store was designed to give the customers an immersive and engaging experience with beautiful designs and displays on the windows, beautiful decorations everywhere, and a lot of different products for them to touch and feel and experience. So he was definitely a business genius because his approach to fashion marketing, commercialization, and customer experience were so influential and introduced a new business model that still lives up until this day. Okay, number 4 is Jeanne Paquin. Jeanne Paquin was one of the greatest couturiers of her generation. She was the first major female couturier and one of the pioneers in the modern fashion business. Many of her gowns were a blend of draping and tailoring, which was very appropriate for the life of the women on the early 20th century, and she was recognized for her romantic gowns and very fine workmanship. Initially, she favored pastels in her designs at the time, but then quickly moved on to stronger, darker colors like black, then consolidating red as her signature color. As we said with Coco Chanel in the previous video, black has been traditionally seen as a mourning color or the color of servants, but even before Chanel gave her own meaning to an all-black ensemble, Jeanne made the color stylish by combining it with vividly colored linings and embroidery. Just like Charles Frederick Worth and so many other entrepreneurs of the era, she knew the importance of using celebrities as publicity and to gain popularity. And she was the first couturier to use influencers as we know them today, and she sent models to different events like operas and galas and horse races, and all of this to gain publicity. She was also revolutionary in the way she expanded her business to the world. Paris was the capital of the world at that point, but she recognized the importance to expand her business abroad. So she opened boutiques in London, which actually employed a very young Madeleine Vionnet, New York, Buenos Aires, and Madrid. So there's really no doubt that Jeanne Paquin had a vision of fashion as a business even before anyone could consider it as such. And lastly, coming a little bit closer in time, we have Yves Saint Laurent. As with many people on this list and also the previous list that we did, Yves Saint Laurent was a rupturist not only in his work during his Dior era but also his own work. I think it is safe to say that we all know that Yves Saint Laurent started his career at the house of Dior as Christian Dior's left hand and also then the creative director after his death. But if we're being completely honest, and although Yves Saint Laurent, I think that he's a complete genius, his style and Dior's style were not a match by any means. As we said, he was a rupturist. He wanted women to dress more comfortably and elegantly, and also had a more androgynous vision of women's fashion. And Dior, on the other hand, is based on traditional femininity and sophistication and the art of dressing up. So during his stay in Dior, he's credited with the invention of the trapeze silhouette, which is a variation of Dior's A-line silhouette of 1955. But it was when he departed from Dior that he could express his full potential. In 1962, he founded his own fashion house, Yves Saint Laurent, or YSL, where he created and popularized the beatnik look, the safari jacket for both men and women, tight trousers, thigh-high boots, and of course the smoking, which was a variation of a men's tuxedo. And is also credited with initializing in 1978 the very prominent and big padded shoulder silhouettes that would characterize the whole 1980s fashion. He was also the first French couturier to launch a full ready-to-wear collection in 1966 with the intention to democratize haute couture, understanding first of all that less expensive clothes would reach a larger clientele, and secondly the growing informality of the modern women's life, making it the industry that we know it today. His ready-to-wear collections reflected his approaches to individuality, sexual freedom, and female empowerment. So throughout the 1960s and 70s, his creations caused scandal, but they would ultimately create the typical wardrobe of the late 20th century. So he was definitely a genius. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. Let me know what you think about all of these personalities and which personality do you think it should be included in the next video. Lastly, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications down below. And as always, I will leave the links in the description box of all of my social media so you can go check them out. I hope you have an incredible rest of your day. I will see you in my next video. Ciao, ciao!